Hi guys, welcome to the Lare Studios. This is another episode of Android programming. Sit back, relax and enjoy this. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to upload media files, be it images, probably you snap an image or you select from the gallery, video and PDF. We'll be talking about how to upload these image files to the server, to the cloud, a PHP driven server, and we'll be using Android Retrofit as the client network library to actually get this done for us. So we're actually going to be interacting with different calls. We're actually going to be looking at how to handle runtime permissions, which was introduced from Android Mashmallow. That's the Android 6 API 23. So we'll be handling that in this tutorial, and we'll be talking about how to interact with file storage on Android devices, which is specific to Android API 21 and above, which is Lollipop. The kind of you're going to be doing that differently from what we have in previous API versions when you're trying to save a camera snap image to a temp storage before converting that to a file and so on. So we'll be handling that. We'll be doing for two different API compatibility for the backward compatible chunk of code, which will be running for API 21 and below, and for the API which will be for 21 and above. We'll also be covering that in this video. I'll be breaking this down into different parts. We'll be focusing on the images for this part. In subsequent videos, we'll talk about the video, we'll talk about PDF and some other formats that are very necessary to upload to the server. So let's get started. Right there in Android Studio, I have the root of the source code. We have that in the network folder. You should understand that network definitely means the interaction with the external service, where we have the API config. This is where we'll be talking about retrofit at this point in time. We have the image activity, the main activity, which will be the launcher, the PDF activity and video activity. We're actually looking at that three different image media formats. So we'll be starting up with the image activity. But before I go there, let's get to look at the PHP file that will be consuming this upload. That will be expecting the image format, or we're going to be expecting the MP4, or we'll be expecting the .pdf to actually get that saved to an upload directory right there in the server. So we'll be heading straight down to cloud, or where I have this right there. This is the cPanel. You should be familiar with these if you're just starting up with business websites or PHP, ASP.NET, when you're just trying to upload to a server, to a GoDaddy, to a Gradle, and some other companies out there that actually give hosting platform. So you could actually set up this. This is a live server. You could also use XAMPP. You could also use WAMP. Or these are all local server that will be running right there on your machine. So right there you have this. I have a file called upload image.php. This file basically does what? It takes it creates a target directory, which you have as the uploads folder. We have it right there. If you could see this, we have the uploads folder just in the same directory with the upload image PHP file. So that uploads folder will actually be saving all those pictures, all those videos and PDF files. So you have that set up. Let's get to look at the details of this file. We have the target file name, which is this, which calls to the target directory, and the base name, and the response is going to be an array, as you could see right there. So we're going to check if the image file is actual an image or a fake image. So this is actually going to handle any format. We'll be tweaking this as time goes on, but this is just specific for the image. And now you check if the file is set, because you're going to be sending as a file. You're sending it as a file from the client, which is the Android app. And if the move upload file is, you're gonna move that to a temp. You give it a temp name, and it's going to be targeted with the target file name. What's the target file name? The target file name is just the target directory, which is the uploads folder as you see it. So what's going to happen if it is successfully uploaded? You're going to have that success message which is going to be true, and the message will be successfully uploaded. Else, there's going to be a false success, and it's going to be an error while uploading. So you have that also set up. And if there's a missing field, it's actually going to speed that out appropriately too. So you have that as false, required field, missing. So you have that set up, and you need to encode those response in JSON encode. So once you have that, it's going to echo that out, and it's going to be the response when there's a successful upload or a failure. So that's just about the PHP file. We'll be headed straight back to Android Studio, and let's talk about the client. Let's get the juicy aspects out of it. In the build Gradle, start from the build Gradle, where we have some of the dependencies, very important. We have the implementation, the material dialogues. This is just a dialog whereby you could extend more on a click. Probably a click will show you 5 or 4 options to deal with. And this we're going to actually be using it when you're trying to pick an image or trying to snap from the camera. So that's the essence of this material dialog. And you have the glide, which is basically for displaying images. That's glide. Retrofit, SPARP, Retrofit 2.0.0. That's the latest at the point of recording. And you have the convert to JSON also, which you could help to actually intercept your API calls, and you could also put the debug so you could see as the calls are being done. So with this, you sync your Gradle, you're good to go. Let's get to see how the network is going to look like. We're going to start with the AppConfig right there in a package of the networking. And the first aspect you see is the base URL. The base URL is just the starter of your API. If you could see, it's behind the domain name, the unitpuzzlegame.com. It could be anything. If you are using the local host, it's going to be a kind of API. I say API, it's going to be a kind of let's say IP address, like 10.2 point something. So that's just going to be the domain. It's going to be this base URL since you're not using it on a live server. So that's for those that will be testing this out on XAMPP or WAMP. You have this base URL, you start up the builder where you pass in the base URL, and they add the converter factory, which is the JSON, which is actually going to convert JSON to a readable object in Java. So it's actually going to convert anything you see here. And if you're having your POJO is simply a JSON format. That's just what that's going to do. Build this up, and you have that set up. Let's get to look at the API config itself. There's an interface that interacts with the AppConfig, where you have your post, your get, your put, your patch, your delete. Those verbs to interact with your APIs will be around here. And what's going to be the endpoint? That's the attaching link to your base URL. You have the images definitely moving to the upload image.php. So where it sits, so it's actually going to get to the path of the upload image PHP that I just showed you. Now this image PHP is expecting something. It's expecting the header and also expecting the body, which is going to be a map where we're going to pass the string. The string is going to be the title, or let's say the name of the file, while the request body will be the file itself. So we actually put that in a multi-part where we're going to actually get that set up to it. So that's just the 2 parameters that will be needed in the call to post this particular media file to the server. Let's get to look at the server response. The response you'll be expecting is the messages. As said, you have the success and the message. So the success is a boolean, either true or false. If true, successfully uploaded, which is the message. If false, probably there's an error somewhere that actually got that to fail. So that will also be the message. So that's the server response we're expecting. Heading straight to the main activity. Now we understand how the network call is going to look like. In the main activity, the extends the app compact. Well, we all implement the view on click listener. We should know all this by now. When you are implementing view on click listener, definitely a button, or you could undo the click listener on that. Even a view, you could undo a click listener on that. So you could just extend its ID and just manipulate any call from there. In the create method, we initialize all the views you needed, the image, video, PDF, and this time we're going to check for runtime permission, because will be needed. The camera is better. You handle the permission right from the beginning, which is actually going to tell you you need this service, you need this hardware, uh, you need this permission to get this done. So that's just what they're gonna do. Now, what's the permission we needed? Firstly, we check that if you've actually granted the permission somewhere, probably somewhere, which is the camera and the external storage. These are the things that will be needed. The camera, most especially, to check for the permission. If it's granted, you know, it's going to. If it's not granted, right there, it's going to set the image button, the video button, the PDF button to unclickable. Quickly, let's get to look at the rest so that we could understand what this is going, the look and feel of this. So we understand all this coming. It's gonna load. Let's get to look at the preview. Preview is very important, so we could click back again. Okay, it's coming up. Cool. We can see that. So we are having 3 buttons in the main activity to actually trigger the upload activity, and to trigger the video activity, and to trigger the PDF activity. So that's just how I placed it. And the first is the upload image. So when you decide not to give permissions at this point in time, these buttons won't be enabled. You can't really access, you can't click, it's unclickable. So that's just it. You could see how we could tie the importance of the permission to the buttons. So let's move forward with our implementation. Now you set the enable to be false. If the permissions are granted, you give a true, you make that enabled, you make the button clickable. So that's just it. Now we set a click listener to the image video PDF. Cool. Now after, if the permission is not granted, for example here, the permission is not granted, it's going to request for the permissions to be granted. And at this point in time, it's going to request for write 2 permissions. It's going to request for the read external storage, the camera, and the write external storage, 3 permissions. So these permissions are very important in the course of running other aspects of your app. Now at this point in time, you need to handle the on request permissions results, where you pass in the request code, the permissions, and the grant request. The grant results, these are the parameters that must be passed into this method. And now what's going to happen? You need to grant the permission, test if the request code is 0. We all know a 0 sign always been okay. That's a 200 okay. So if it's okay, you need to actually get the length of the grant results and check for the permission granted, if it's actually granted, and if it's granted, cool, you're good to go. You set the enabled. You need to trigger the buttons back. They need to be enabled, the image, the video, the PDF, so you could actually undo clicks on that. Cool. We've now set click listeners to these buttons. Now how are we going to move further from this? The image goes to the image activity, the video goes to the video activity, while the PDF moves straight down to the PDF activity. So heading straight to the image activity. That's the focus for today, the image activity. Let's get to pick images, let's get to snap pictures, let's get to upload that to the server. This extends AppConfig. Still, we have the on-click listener, because we're going to be talking about the material dialogues, where we're going to pick 2 different functionalities, select from gallery, or we actually pick from the camera. Now let's get to look at the fields. We have the field setup, the camera request, the take photo, or the pick photo. That's the index, the integer rather, and we have the buttons, the media path, and the file URI. We've all set that up, and we also have the progress dialog to get this done at the background, so we could actually have that displayed. And now you initialize those fields over here, and you set listeners to the pick image and the upload image. Let's get to look at this view in a GV, the image layout over here. The image layout, what's going to show? Cool. We have it here, the pick image and the upload image, and this is going to be the canvas, or let's say the image view, to show, to display the selected image or the snapped image. Cool. Over here, so you could actually strike on the upload to upload to the server, And pick image will give you the room to pick, probably to snap or to select from gallery. Let's move further. Now we have that setup. Now on click of the pick image, you call on the material dialog. So that's where we have the builder, and we have an array already in the rest. Let's get to look at the array over here in the values, arrays. So you have that setup. That's going to be titles. We have pick from gallery, click from camera, or remove the image. You just don't want to upload any image anymore. So you have the corresponding item IDs: gallery image, camera image, remove image. I think that's explicit enough. Back to the image activity. So we have it at the items and its IDs. Now the callback we'll be getting from that dialog, we're going to use a switch statement to handle those array, because an array index starts from 0, as you all know. So the first one is going to be what? Pick from gallery, where we're going to trigger. On click of that, what you're going to do, you trigger the action pick, where you call the provider media store images media, calling the external content URI. That's just what you need. You need a URI, which will be definitely converted to file when you are uploading to the server. You start activity for results, expecting a result whereby you pass the gallery intent, which you've actually started up, and the request integer, which type of request is it, which is actually the request pick photo. Cool. So we're going to handle this result. Let's get to look at that later on. If it's going to be you capturing an image using the camera, we call this method capture image. We'll get to look at the content of that method as well. The last will be when you're trying to cancel an image you don't want anymore. So you just set the image result to a drawable file and it get back to a normal state. So cool. So the two focus will be for the selecting an image from the gallery and the capturing an image using the camera. We'll get to look at that before we look at the upload method. Let's get to look at that quickly. We're expecting an activity for results over here, which is actually for selecting of an image. Now what's going to happen when the request code is the result code is okay, and if the request code is photo, and the request code is also the request pick photo, just to be very sure, and if the data returned is not equals to null, you're going to get the image from the data, which is data get data, pass that to a URI object, selected image as a URI. So you have a URI already. Now what you're going to do, you're going to go further. We have the file path columns. This is a string array. Now you have the media store, where it's actually going to where the storage of media, as the name implies, and you call the images media data to that. So you have a file path column which could be using that. Now we're going to use the content resolver. Get content resolver, the query, the selected. Now you are trying to query the words, the gallery content provider. Simple. You only need the URI, which is an identifier to that image, and now you're going to query the content, the content provider of the gallery. That's just it. Now what you know, you query this. The selected image is the URI needed. You should not content how to query using the get content resolver to get the query. You're using a content provider. Very simple. Now the file path column, which is the columns needed, we've actually gotten that from the media store images media data rather. And now the selection argument, the sort of that could be null, since you have the URI, which is specific to that image. Now you get that. You have the cursor. If you are set the cursor to not be equals to null at this point, you move to first, try to iterate through. If it's coming in 2, 3, 4, probably you selected 5 images. That's just the essence of that. Now the column index is actually going to be an integer. When you get the column index from the file path, you're getting, since we're expecting 1, because you're only selecting 1 at a time. If you're selecting more than that, that's when you could actually have this in an array. But now we are having the first index of an array, which is actually going to be the first one. So you could have you could select more than 1 images. You could do that. You could use the get content resolver to get that done for you. Now the first index, You have that. You get a string, pass that to the media part. Now the media part has a value. What you're going to do, you set the image in the image view for previewing the media. The image view already, which you have on top of those buttons. You set the image bitmap. Now you need to decode the file, the media part, which is actually what? The URI. Now when you decode that, it's usable since you've used the set image bitmap. Now what you're gonna do, you close the cursor. We still need the media part, so that's why we pass that to the post part. Just for the same name, we need just a unique name, one name for different implementation. When you're selecting from gallery, when you're snapping to, when you're snapping using the camera. Cool. You have that as a post part. Let's move on. So you've concluded that when it comes to picking image from the gallery. What you're going to do when it comes to the other aspects, when the camera, when you're interacting with the camera, we'll get to look at that later. Now let's get to look at the implementation that gets there, that gets back there. What's the implementation? The implementation is the capture image method. A quick dip into the capture image method. Let's get a look at that. Capture image method over there. This is going to launch the camera app to capture the image, and that's where we need the different configuration settings. Now, if the build versions SDK integer is greater than 21, which is Lollipop, it's going to do something different. If it's lower, it's going to do something different. So I've actually handled this. You might be having a lot of terrible issues when it comes to taking camera on probably Mashmallow device or Nougat. The way you're going to handle this is different. Now there's a different approach, unlike what has been done or the way you actually do this in KitKat, in Jelly Bean, and so on. So I have the two implementations right there for you to understand how it's going to be done. Now let's get to look at it. Firstly, when you're talking about API version 21 and above, Lollipop and above, you have the camera intent right there. You create an intent. You set an action, which is the media store now, the action image capture. Cool. You have an intent object already. Now we're going to give some instructions to the intent to save the image, which is the file. The photo file will be null at this point in time. We have a try and catch block. The essence of the catch is for the input and output exception, the I exception. Now in the try block, if the creates image file, this guy creates image file, we get to look at this. If it's successful, it's going to actually set the photo file to the address of the file, to the photo file over here. That's if it's successful. If it's not, it's going to handle an exception. So we need to look at this method, the create image file. That's the next implementation. Just get this done once and for all. The create image file is a file method that throws an exception as well, the I exception, which was catched in the user. When you're trying to consume it, you need to catch it. It just throws it, it's not catching it, you're right there. So what it's going to do, you're going to create a date format, just a timestamp over here. We have the simple time, date and time, year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. Convert that to date. The file name, you could set that file name. It could be any file name from somewhere, just a file name. So we added a timestamp, so that it's actually going to be unique. It's not going to override each of the file. That's why the timestamp is being added. So a timestamp at the point of taking that picture will be different. Now we're going to specify the environmental location and the exact path where we're going to save the file. That's the SL of the storage directory, where you get the external storage public directory. Very important. And you pass that. Where you're going to pass it? The directory pictures. That's the recommended external storage you need to actually interact with. And you append that with the photo saving app just to make a full path. Okay, let's move further. Now you're going to create the storage directory if it doesn't exist. So you're going to make the directory over here. That's if it's not existing. And you're going to also create the file using a prefix or a suffix and the directory. Now you're creating a file from this, which is the storage directory. That's the storage position, the image file name, what you've created over here, and now you're appending the MIME type .jpg. If you are using .pdf, we'll get to look at that later on. What it's going to do, this location is saved into the string image file location using the logger get anonymous logger. You may not really need this. Let's move further. You call on the image file location, the image gets absolutely path. That's where you're calling the file. That's the location. You're passing that as a URI. So you have a URI. When you get absolute path, that's you're getting the URI, the path to the file right there. You're trying to save a file in a temporary location in the device. That's just it. When you've picked the image, you're saving it to a temporary location. Now you return the image. Which image are you returning? Let's get to know the image you're returning. Over here, you're returning the file itself. But at this point in time, you have the URI, the image file location. Cool. That is when you're creating an image. Now, when you're creating an image over here, you pass that to this file. Cool. Still moving further, you're not through yet. Now you need to save this, where you need to add an extra file to the intent to put the address onto it. For this purpose, you have to use the file provider, which is declared in the manifest. That's a different implementation entirely. Now you need to actually declare something right there in the manifest. A peep into a manifest. Can you see it over here? The provider, which has a name pointing to the file provider, Android support version 4 content. The authorities just appended this way: the application ID and the provider. You could export it if you like. You grant the URL permissions, true, and you have a metadata, which is the file provider part, and the resource calling the XML. We created an XML file, an XML directory over here, and the provider parts. Cool. So this is for global parts, for any external part, any file you whatsoever, PDF, any file TXT that you're trying to save temporarily in the Android device. So at this point in time, you've handled it completely well. You won't have any crash whatsoever at that point. So cool, that's the essence. That took us back. Now you get to call it back. The output URI, you are trying to get the URI from the file, where you have the context, the authority, the application ID, the provider, as you see, the build config, and the photo file itself, which is the file. You now call camera application to put the extra into the extra output. Now you are putting an extra into the intent that you've created. Now you need to do what to add the following as a new line when you're trying to attempt. You add a flag that grants the URI permission to this implementation. Cool. After that, you follow up by calling the start activity for results, and you call the camera app and wait for this file in return. Call the camera app at this point in time and wait for the file, and in return create a temporary file, attach it to what you've had, and at the same time speed it back. You can see the back and forth. It's quite lengthy when it comes to higher version, API 21. It was very easy when you implementing this in lower API versions. Just look at the chunk. If it's just probably a KitKat, look at the few lines of code you're just going to implement. So if it's not API 21, you just call the action image capture. You get output media file, the same output media file URI we actually talked about. Where do we have this method? We have it somewhere. Let me get to find that. Okay, over here. And this is actually going to convert, it's going to create the file URI to store the image or video. Now we are actually using it for the image, which is actually going to speed it out, convert from the file, just convert the file to the URI. That's just what that's going to do, since that's just how it's been done when we are interacting with lower versions of Android. Now you just put the extra of the file URI. Now you've gotten the file URI out of the box. You start an activity for result. The same start for an activity for result, which you have here right there. So let's get to look at the start activity for result. Let's get to look at the implementation we're going to be expecting. It's is going to be over here. Cool, over here. Else if the request code is camera pic request, now it's going to test if the version SDK is greater than 21. If it is, just use glide to load the image to the image view, which you have the image file location. Now we have the image file location at the point when we've extracted URI. You can see where we actually had that. You pass that to the image view, and you have trying to have a post path which will be generic, which will be usable in different implementation, either for SDK version higher or lower. The second implementation, you have the file URL already, because these are global variables I've declared, so they are usable all through the application, and the image view, and you get the path. When you're calling get absolute path or get path, trying to get the URI of the file, you pass that to the URI post path. Cool. We've not talked about when you're uploading yet. This is just when you're extracting or when you're snapping and viewing. Just snap and view. Now upload is quite another implementation which will be done, which I'll show you in a jiffy. Now when you're trying to upload this file to the server, you have the upload file when you strike on the button. Now this is actually going to test for the path which we've actually set those values to. Is a URI. If it's null, or if it's not equals to, if it's empty, so it's basically just say that no, you don't have any file to upload, just return immediately. But if it's not, it has a valid URI. It shows the dialog, something wants to happen. You're trying to upload, you're trying to upload to the server. Now what you're going to do is going to call the map, which is used to multipath the file using the OK HTTP3, the request body, which is out of the box supported with Retrofit. Now we have the map, the string as the first generic parameter, and the second is the request body. Instantiate the hash map. We're using hash map here to get this done. We have also the file. We're converting the URI to a file, which you have a file object. So now we're going to be passing any media type file. So you just call the request body to create the media type. It's going to pass this, which is the file. So we have a request body as the file itself. Now the map, you're going to put something, the string, the first parameter is the string, which is the file name, and the second is the request body. So you have a map already. Now you call the response to the retrofit, where you create that class, the API config class, and you have an object from that, the get response, which could interact with a method in the interface, which is the response you're having over here, the call. Now the call will get on queue and instantiate a new callback, which has where you're going to override two methods, the on response and on failure. This is very straightforward. From here it's getting straightforward. We've had the bulk of the work is when you're trying to extract that file. That's where the issue is. Now at this point in time, you just upload that, which you have the response. You've been able to meet the parameters. Now what's the parameter of the upload? We have the map itself, which has the file name and the request body, and the token. So probably you need an authentication to just pass a token. That's just to authorize that implementation. So you could actually add the header authentication if you want to go further to implement that. Now if the request body is successful, that's just a good standard. And if the response body too is not equals to null, definitely that's a success message. Just you stop the dialog at this point in time. This is where you need to you need to hide the dialog here. You need to hide it. Don't continue it. You hide it at this point in time, and you get to send the body to the server response class, which is the response over here. Now we actually get the success message, boolean, and the message. So at that point in time, you could actually toast gracefully to the user that you've actually done something good. You've completed your upload. That's it. That's the message, which is actually successfully uploaded message. Cool. Now if there's a problem whatsoever, probably the result is not successful, is going to actually toast a message, and if there's an error as well on failure, is actually going to toast a message. At this point in time too, you need to hide the dialog. So that completes it. So you could see where we've been coming from. We pick a picture, we go through back and forth, we try to save to a provider, try to get that extracted back to a file, try to convert back to URI, try to upload to the server. You use the file, you map the hash map to have the file name and the request body, and get that uploaded to the server. So we've actually completed the full structure of how to select image from the gallery, and how to take pictures with a camera and get that same file uploaded to the server using Retrofit as a network API call to the server. And we have the PHP driven server-side language that actually consumes that and save that to the uploads directory right there in your server. So that's just it, completed. I'll be showing the screencast of this implementation so that you could actually see how it flow, and I'll also be committing the source code to my GitHub repository so you can actually pick up the copy from there, and I will be right there to entertain questions. You could leave that right there in the comment section, and don't forget to strike on the subscribe button. Please subscribe to my channel so that you could have first-hand information when it comes to Android development. So thank you very much for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial. This is the beginning of the series of uploading media type to the server. We'll be talking about the PDF, we're talking about the video in subsequent videos. Don't go anywhere, stay glued to Delaware Studios. Bye bye for now.